Meeting's not resumed. We have a minute. Okay. Wait. Okay. Sorry, everyone, but the meeting is resumed, and I believe we are live streaming. We are. Awesome. Well done. Great effort, Zoe and IT. So we're now at the deliberation stage where we're going to actually make some decisions, but I just wanted Joe to cover the things that under legislation we are not able to bring into our considerations and those that are. So Joe, would you?
Thank you for that. Just to review to page 22 of your report there, which outlines the points that were raised that by submitters that were outside of the representation review. So that's a useful reminder at the start of this session, so you don't delve into details that are outside what we can focus on as part of the deliberations. So that was timing and frequency of the reviews, the Māori wards, and there was questions that were raised in the submissions about workloads on community boards, councillor role, and that was linked with things like, is that position full-time or part-time? And as we talked about, you'll see in the staff comment there that the Remuneration Authority sets the remuneration for local government members, which includes setting a governance pool for council, which provides the total amount that must be paid in rem to councillors in each individual council. And so as part of that process, that gives consideration to how elected members are paid and recognising that workloads and expectations vary between councils. So that whole question is a question that is dealt with through the Remuneration Authority process. It is not one for the representation review process. There was, and that linked with that, also we had some feedback that said, talked about councillors' pay rises, and so you will see there in your report, the Local Government Commission have stated their view that a representation review is not the appropriate mechanism for addressing councillor remuneration. So that was reiterated again. That's also being featured in all the guidance that comes out from the Local Government Commission on representation reviews. They are aware that a number of councils around the country have raised this, and they have pointed out that this is not a factor for your representation review. That is a separate process. Things like improving the quality of councillors because you've got less and being able to pay more. So actually kind of who comes forward for nominations and is elected is actually a question for the electoral process. So that again is a separate process outside the representation review. So just hopefully that's a good framework for going forward. The things that we shouldn't be talked about or aren't part of the deliberations going forward.
Thanks, Joe. I think Monty's got a question on that.
Yeah, thank you. Question, this decision matrix is really helpful. I'm just querying the last one, the community boards. The options that you've got in there, how come they are in scope given the nature of the community consultation that we've conducted thus far?
So what happens when we when you do your representation review process is what you do when you adopt your initial proposal is you adopt a complete structure and you go out and the community can provide feedback on any part of that structure which you have adopted. And obviously the structure that you adopted included the community boards because that's part of your current structure. So there was a general comment section at the end of the submission form. And so that was where people could provide feedback on any part of the structure that formed part of that initial proposal resolution.
Thank you for that. I understand.
It was kind of automatic, in other words, yeah. Okay, now I think you have a presentation for us.
I do. Hopefully, Stephen Hill is online there. He was going to start off. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Joe. Kia ora, Mr. Chair and councillors. Good to be with you again. I did manage to hear most of this morning's session. It was a little bit challenging, but it was really useful to be able to hear from submitters this morning. What I want to do is just start off with a couple of slides, really to reiterate some of the process steps and the key areas of focus that we would advise that you are looking at today as part of your deliberations, and take you through where we're looking for you to get to. So what we'll do is just start by talking about the actions that you need to take as you consider the submissions, and remember that you are considering all of the submissions that have been received, both those as well as those that presented to you in person today. So you are considering all submissions. There is no extra weight given to those who submitted in person. So all of those submissions are part of your thinking today. What we'll do is take you through some of the key themes from the submissions. They have been summarised so that we don't have to go through each one individually. The key themes have been identified. And we also note that there are some alternatives that have been suggested by some of the submitters. So alternative proposals or ways that you could consider structuring the representation arrangements. So you'll undertake your deliberations, and what we are looking for in terms of where we get to at the end of the session is some guidance from you to staff that will help staff to prepare the final proposal, which comes to you next month for adoption. And there are essentially two choices. Either you can adopt the initial proposal as it is without any amendments as the final proposal, or you can amend the initial proposal. You can actually make any amendments at all to the initial proposal in response to submissions. And one of those might be to revert to the council's current representation arrangements. We do note that those current arrangements are not entirely compliant with the plus or minus 10% rule, and so that would require referral to the Local Government Commission in terms of seeking an exemption for those elements. So it's either adopt the initial proposal or amend the initial proposal, and that's the guidance, the key guidance that we're seeking from you in this session today. Just on to the next slide. Thanks, Joe. Jumping ahead. So this is really just a reminder that you must consider all submissions, as we've talked about. One of the key things that is important when the final proposal is adopted, and we publicly notify that, is that the council has to be able to show that it has considered all those submissions by noting where it has accepted submitters' views and where it has rejected submitters' views, and the reasons for either accepting or rejecting those. And so a key consideration is that any amendments that you make to your initial proposal or the final proposal should be made in response to submissions. So that's, I guess, the Commission is saying you can't introduce new material out of left field at this stage. You can only make changes in response to submissions. So matters that have been raised by submitters are available for you to consider as possible amendments to the initial proposal. And then just a reminder about the process steps, there is a statutory deadline of 31st of October for council to publicly notify its final proposal. I understand this is scheduled to come back to, the final proposal will come back to you in the middle of October. And so that's where council, where staff are seeking guidance as to what the form and structure of that final proposal should be, and any amendments if they are proposed from the initial proposal. So happy to answer any questions on the process. Otherwise, happy for Joe to start working through the material that we've got for you to have a look at.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Oh, yes, we have a question from Roger for you.
Thanks, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. You mentioned that one of our options is to adopt the status quo, and that would then need to go to the what's it called? The
Commission.
Yep. Because we have a non-compliance of 10.47 in that Pirongia Kakupuku. You mentioned that one of the options of the Commission was to accept that as a variation, but what are the other options that are open to the Commission? Is it possible that they could just send that back and say, that's not acceptable? Could they require us to do some other action? And where would that place us subsequent to that response coming back?
Yeah, the Commission has pretty much an open book as to the steps that it can take, and it will look back at the entire process and all of the submissions, and when it comes to making its determination. From my experience, where there is a non-compliance that is relatively minor, which it is in this case, I would expect that the Commission would not necessarily dismiss that out of hand, and they may well consider providing an exemption for that non-compliance in that kind of case. Now, that's not to say that they will, but from past experience, that's what we do often observe. Alternatively, they might determine, and they will make the determination. They won't send it back to the council to do further work or consultation. They will make a determination and say, this is what the structure will be. So they could determine some alternative structure. They might determine that the initial proposal is actually the one that should be adopted. But that's where I guess it's important that the council in its final proposal makes its case for why the final proposal that it is proposing is the most appropriate one, and that's what will be considered by the Commission.
Have they got an option of boundary changes? The Commission,
Yes.
can they make a boundary change, say move 100 people from here to that ward, and then that will make it then compliant?
They could consider that. The other thing to keep in mind is that if the council's final proposal is subject to appeals and objections, if appeals and objections are made, then the council will also hear those appeals and objections, and they will hear from those submitters or appellants and objectors in terms of any proposals or suggestions that they may have as to alternative arrangements.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're finally ready to actually get down to the meat of this. So, Joe, thanks very much. Look, first of all, thanks for all the work your team's done on this, and the summaries you've provided and whatever. I'm going to ask people to turn to their decisions required sheets that have been handed round. And clearly, the first decision that we need to make is whether we stick to the initial proposal or not. So I'm going to, sorry, I've got jumped ahead of myself. Joe, go for gold.
Thank you. Just really, before you get to that decision making, just to really recap, I think the purpose of this section of the meeting is to do that. So just recapping from the start on the number of submissions, 108, one late submission. I just wanted to point out to you that it was significantly more than the last representation review, where we had 49. So that was just about doubling. In response to that initial question that was asked about people did support all aspects of the proposal, we had 21% that did and 79% that didn't. So really, the key aspect of the initial proposal that was put forward was that reduction in the number of councillors. So that was reducing one councillor from the Cambridge ward, one from Te Amutu and Kiki. And in order to get the reduction in the councillor from the rural ward, we needed to combine those two rural wards of Mangatautari and Prongia Kakapuku. As you can see from the slide up there, 72% of our submitters were against that, 23% were in support, and 5% were neutral. Themes from the comments that were provided, there are people that thought the intent of agreed with the intent of trying to achieve a more efficient, higher functioning team. Others were concerned that the reduction in councillors wouldn't provide for adequate representation for them. It would reduce their access. They thought that the district's growing already, so we'd need more, and there was high workloads already. There was a number of concerns that were presented in the comments about the impact on the rural wards of combining those two wards. People thought it was a large area. There was diverse needs of different communities in that area that was being combined, and there was that potential for councillors to come from one side of the district. That's particularly an issue where we've got, in terms of our rural wards, the higher population sitting over here in Prongia and Kakapuku, and that's where we've seen the growth. This time, this representation review, actually, while on the other side at Mangatautari, we've seen a slight decrease in numbers. So you can see that there is quite an imbalance between the different sides of the district in terms of population numbers. Obviously, has caused some concern. There were alternatives proposed, put forward by people, so it's important to make sure that they are considered. There was 8 or 11 councillors, that's our initial proposal and our current representation. There was also a 9 councillor solution. Someone said, what about 9? That was a solution that we looked at as part of the process, and we got 9 to work with a straight east-west split of the district. But that did involve combining urban and rural wards to make that number work, which is unlikely to meet the communities of interest test. When we looked as part of the pre-engagement, we did have people coming up and say, what about 10? We tested that, and that didn't work with the current ward structure or combined rural ward. And then we had another solution presented, which was like the one that we had considered in 2021, which effectively the Prongia area and just south of Te Amutu was in one ward, and then the rest was kind of Waipa rural east. And when we tested that in 2021, it didn't meet the communities of interest test, and with the reduced number of councillors, not likely to meet the plus or minus 10% rule either. We had those two alternatives up, first two alternatives up here, where we had suggestions about bringing Mangatautari and Cambridge together. Again, that has been, the separate rural representation has been a key factor in past representation reviews as being important. When we've tested it with the community back in when you did the survey in 2018, came back again in 2021 as a key issue, and also from councillor views. And then when we tested that in the pre-engagement as well, that separate rural representation came through loud and clear. I think that was the most definitive response in relation to that separate rural representation we got in the pre-engagement. So not taken those further on that basis. There was some feedback that alternatives, people were thinking could Mangatoshi and Karapiro go together. In terms of the initial proposal, having Karapiro with effectively what would be in the Waipa Rural General Ward doesn't make the plus or minus 10% rule. It's a, if you were minded to look at retaining your current structure, that is something you could consider. That the village at Karapiro has been in with the Cambridge ward since 2007, 2008. So it has been there for quite some time. All we were doing with this, the initial proposal that we went out with was to add the area on the other side of the dam in. Then we had some which were looking, some alternatives, they were looking for more definitive representation in some of our towns and areas like Kiki and Limatan, or increasing councillors for towns. That then poses also issues in terms of how you're able to divide that up and meeting communities of interest in the plus or minus 10% rule. That makes it quite hard to balance that and make numbers. Where we had some people suggesting, someone suggested we drop down even further. That was something that came out of the pre-engagement. People had raised whether they thought actually maybe 6 or 7. And when we tested that after the pre-engagement, that didn't work with the current structure or combined rural ward option. We did have another alternative come forward, which is 1 councillor per 3,000 people, with 7 in Cambridge, 5 in Te Murakeke, and 6 in rural and 1 or 2 Māori wards. That would give us approximately 20 councillors, which is more what you're looking at. I think Auckland's got 20, and even some of your bigger metros like Christchurch and Wellington, I think, sit at kind of 16 and 18. So that type of number is what you would traditionally see in those larger councils. So that's just kind of a run through of the themes that came out, as well as the alternative proposals. So it is now at the point in time you need to decide between the initial proposal, the current structure, or whether you want to consider any of those alternative proposals, which we've just run through in those earlier slides and are also included in your report.
Awesome. Thanks, Jo. Right. I'm now going to invite people. I think I'll ask for someone to speak in favour of the initial proposal to kick things off. I'm going to ask people to stick to those areas that we are allowed to, under legislation, allowed to discuss, and not go into areas that we were not. And just on that, Claire is engaged to nudge me firmly if people go off track, and I will pull people up. Okay, so just putting it out there. So, Mike.
It's a point of clarification, because this is a little bit more formal, which is absolutely fine. Technically, I think we're allowed to speak once. So I was trying to get your view on how many,
That
how many
is,
times?
look, understanding orders, if we wish to invoke them, yes, you get to speak once, and there's a right of reply to, I'm not going there, okay? So our usual informal backwards and forwards is still fine, unless we get. Okay, so Susan, would you like to speak on behalf of,
Yeah, look, I'm happy to get the ball rolling, and I hope I don't stray into areas that are not deemed relevant. But I just think it's really important that we consider the context within which these discussions have arisen, and how this piece came to being. You'll be aware that local government's highly dynamic and changing at the moment. It's an environment that in state of flux. With that said, the future for local government reforms around our sector specifically have stalled. Wellington has said quite clearly, we've got no interest. You guys have to come to us with your suggestions, bar some overreach in some places. And in all reality, this is an opportunity for us to be a bit more self-determining. So I guess with that kind of context, my vision was to ensure that the people that sat around this table were the best people in the district who had the ability to make decisions that affect everybody's lives in a positive way, and that they do so with the best governance practices out there at the forefront of their minds. I wanted them to be decision makers who will look long-term and strategically. They need to be decision makers that have the entire of the Waipā district and its people at the heart of their decision making. And quite frankly, that's what our community deserves, not only now for the communities who live here now, but the ones who are going to live here in the future. We have to be future-focused decision makers. Come what may, in terms of the decision that's made today, I'm quite comfortable with accepting the democratic process that will take place around here. We're all adamant advocates of democracy. But I don't accept the contention that the current situation is fit for purpose. And I say that because we operate under a 1989 legacy model. Now, just to remind you, the model we have now is 35 years old. I was in my last year at high school when this model was constructed, and I'm now 52. This model was created 32 years before the internet was widely used in New Zealand. It was created the same year that Sunday trading started and TV3 started broadcasting. So the world has changed. Communities have changed. Communities' expectations have changed. And the way that we engage with and react with our communities and interact with them has changed. I agree this isn't a silver bullet, and there are parts of this that I find really problematic. And there have been some excellent points delivered by submitters, not only in our papers, but in person today. And I am troubled by some aspects of it. Don't get me wrong, I do not believe this is a silver bullet. But there were questions asked about what has changed. And I guess it's no secret that I've been pretty clear about the need for reform in here, because our communities deserve better. And you may recall that there has been extensive work done in terms of working with our community boards to make them become a greater force that informs our decision-making at this table. We've been pretty strident in retaining those, and again, I'm comfortable with that course of action. The corresponding action to that is making this group a more purely governance-oriented body. And this is what this proposal today is aiming to produce. The way I see it, you can't have both. On top of that, we've had a lot of discussion around our table around how we can better hear from and reflect our community's reviews. We've all sung the praises of our great body of work, Ahuaki, and our spatial plan. And the workshop cafe, World Cafes rather, that took place as a result of that engagement. New, exciting, innovative ways of engaging and with our communities and understanding and reaffirming our strategic direction going forward. We can't have that as well. We keep doing an and it's not working. I don't think it makes our decisions any better. And yeah, I'm happy with our conversation today. I would be, I would accept the decision, obviously, because this is a process that we all buy into, but I think it's really short-sighted for us to think that everything is great in the way that we A, do things, and B, the systems under which we function. However, all is not lost. This is not the only piece, right? I know there are a lot of other things that we can do. This is just one of those pieces. Yeah, in terms of my reservations around the proposal, I have two reservations, and I'll speak to one of them. And it's something that has borne out today, and it's around rural voice. And I say this not as the mayor, but as a dairy farmer. I am somewhat anxious about the proposed reduction of the rural voice by a third, because that's what it is, taking 3 down to 2, and there's not a corresponding reduction of a third by the urban voice. I say that as a dairy farmer. And I don't say that because of my desire to have a representative dairy farmer around this table. Why I do say that is because the paths that take rural people and urban people alike collect skill sets and experiences that form your views when you sit here and make those governance decisions. So reducing those numbers of rural people here will of necessity reduce that rural lens. It's not representative, it's just the life experiences that are brought. So I guess ultimately it comes down to whether you think what a representative role is, whether you're a delegate, whether you're a representative, and I won't go into that because we could be here for a long time. It's probably a discussion for a bottle of wine. But yeah, that is my one concern I have, and is a very real concern. The second concern I have is, it's kind of strange, I'm speaking to it and here I'm telling you the reasons against, but I think it's only fair to be honest about reservation. And it probably goes back to Ray Milner's letter in the Cambridge News, which we all, agreed that there was real basis upon which his challenge. Fewer numbers means that there is a possibility that there is capture or you attract the impact of certain voices or philosophies or approaches could be easier to exert over a smaller group rather than a large group. So, and that's totally valid. It's a totally valid concern. So look, I have those two concerns, but I invited us to be honest about whether the current process is fit for purpose, whether we are comfortable with sitting in a 35-year-old legacy model, whether we believe we can do better and how we can do better. So I will support this, but again, I won't cry myself to sleep tonight if it is lost, because it is not the be-all and end-all in terms of upping our game as true, purposeful decision makers in a governance space in Waipa.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Now, a well-balanced and obviously very well considered arguments put there. Okay, who's going to have the next turn? Monty.
Thank you, Mayor Susan. I think you summarised the arguments in favour of this really well. And I totally applaud any efforts that you make to make us work better as a governance group, because I do agree with you. I think there is, look, there's always room for improvement. I've really enjoyed being part of this group in my 2 years here, but we can definitely upskill our game in the governance space. It's a dual role you have sitting here. It's part politics, part governance, and you've got to be really clear on when you're doing the political bit and when you're doing the governance bit. I think people who get here naturally are quite good politicians because they got elected, right? But they're not necessarily good governors because they haven't had the experience or the training. So anything that we can do to enhance that second aspect of the role, the governance, I think would be really beneficial to our council and to all the residents of Waipa. Now, your two major reservations for this proposal are exactly my two as well. The reduction in the rural voice is very important to me. That could look self-serving. I am a rural ward candidate. I'd like to think that I'm not being skewed by any sort of personal ambition there, that I'm thinking for the good of our district and the good of the group. But that is a genuine concern for me. And having been in Waipa all my life, I'm very, very keen that the rural voice is still heard. Now, balancing that, I understand the difference between governance and representation. Representation is that. It's where the voices get heard. Governance is where the decision-making and the accountability sits. So you can still accommodate the voices argument through the representation layer, which currently we're doing through community boards. And your second reservation that reducing the numbers around this table is actually no guarantee of an increased quality, I totally understand. So my judgment is that those two reasons, those two reservations are actually sufficient for me to say that I do not support the reduction in the size of this council. So I would be in favour of an amendment to the initial proposal in the direction of status quo. So yeah, that summarises my position. And yeah, that's me. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Monty. Again, a very clear and well-reasoned, sorted out thing. Claire.
Yeah, thank you. I also, acknowledge Susan's, I suppose analysis of this and the way that she's put the original proposal, and I do definitely support parts of that I agree that it's always important to be trying to up your game and improving what we do, definitely. When we considered this original, I suppose, proposal that we were then going to put out to our community, we did have quite a good discussion about things then. And we'd already done some pre-engagement, and I'd just like to explain that was one of the reasons why I supported this proposal to go out to our community, because at that time, the feedback that we got in that first phase was that there was about a 50-50 split concerning support or not support for changing the rural ward representation. So I'm actually really pleased with the feedback that we've got back from now this process, because I think it means that we have heard from a wider cross-section of our community, and there is a clearer direction for us. And I'm very, very keen to follow that direction. Now, saying that, when we were hearing the submissions, a number of people raised the fact that the statement of proposal was pretty sparse on the reasoning behind some of the, I suppose, the claims that were made about why it was necessary or why it was a good time at the moment to undertake a representation review. So I guess maybe this might be, a learning for us that we've got to actually provide more context, that some of the things that might have been covered off more was, about the need for more professionalism, or the hope that, a higher calibre of person, maybe with particular skills, actually, not necessarily calibre, and that the way that the role had changed in specific terms, like for me, it definitely comes through that it's important for councillors to be contactable and approachable, and I can see that the community really values lots of different people around the table, and they can maybe pick one or two people that they think they, have a strong alignment with, and that is really important. But when I look about where I spend time in my role, like that would be the tiniest sliver, and I think it's because the way people communicate their concerns now has moved on, probably exactly what Susan's saying. Now we do have email, it's easy to phone, there's the website, like people can actually have quite a few channels available to them to communicate with us and what they want to see happen. And I think too, staff make more of an effort to have meetings in the community and things like that. Yeah, so that landscape has changed, and none of that was in the proposal. So where I spend most of my time is definitely reading. I do try and read those 800 pages. Yeah, and also the kinds of meetings that we have, like we do have limited number of committees, definitely. That hasn't changed much either. But we've got a lot more special interest ones and also collaborations. And all of those have agendas to read, and all of them, time to go along to the meetings and contribute to really important conversations, whether they are within our communities, across our district, or in the sub-region, like I'm on the Regional Land Transport Committee and things like that. But something really close to my heart is the housing group. And the water stuff as well. So, they're all really meaty topics that need a lot of serious thought to. So I really value the feedback that's come back, and I'll be taking my lead from that feedback. So I'm more likely to be going to the status quo as the alternative. But I've learned a lot from the community feedback, especially how much they do value democracy, which is, I think, and that's been a really important learning for me. And so I do view this process really positively for that reason. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Okay. Roger.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the two comments that Mayor Susan made about her comments on the proposal as it stands. I think one of the criteria that was asked to consider is the fairness of representation, and that comes through very clearly in the instructions. And I was particularly concerned at the risk that there was with having one rural ward where the representation could have resulted in coming from one particular area of that rural ward. And we are required to assess the risk. I thought that risk was quite high, and it would have made a totally imbalanced representation. But I also take Monty's point, you know, that there is a difference between representation and governance. And perhaps in looking at Mayor Susan's wish to improve our processes of governance, then there are these newer, more modern processes of participatory democracy that we can actually look separately to this representation study that would improve the way that we contacted with our community so that we were better informed to make those governance decisions. So I think I agree with you, Monty, that I think that's a separate avenue that we can actually go down in that regard. But I think in terms of the representation criteria, then I can't see the proposal meeting that. I'm also interested in the community of interest situation, and what came through quite clearly to me from the feedback that yes, there are communities of interest which are defined as west of the region and east of the region, and they seem to have a number of common interest factors that to them are important, that they like that forum to be able to discuss those, and the community boards actually provide that particular forum. Mayor Susan mentioned would the reduction in the number of councillors actually just through that reduction provide any better performance around this table? I can't see that. I think under a democratic election process, you actually get what you get. And although there was some suggestion in one of our workshops that actually candidates should be in some way tested, I'm not too sure that that's full democracy in action. And so I can't see that actually being implemented. But I think, you know, we have a system, and those people that we finish up with around the table are the people that the people have chosen. And I think they're the ones we're going to work with. And it's that process which really determines the quality of the people around the table. So that's my three basic reasons of choosing to stick with the status quo. I was quite pleased with the answer that I got to my question. If we did go with the status quo, what would be the process when it went to the commission? And I felt comfortable that, in fact, that was manageable. So
Yes, I think
thank you.
that's been made quite clear here.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Roger. Okay, so we've had 4 speakers, and I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to say something. I would just ask you to think, we've heard arguments. Don't think we need to hear the same argument repeated 8 times, but everyone, I do want everyone to have an opportunity. And especially if you've got something new to add. Phil.
Well, I don't know if I've got anything new to add, but thanks for the opportunity, and hopefully I don't ramble or I keep to the point. But anyway, I've made some points here, some bullet points. So one thing that really stood out for me today from the submitters is the decision we make, this decision and any other decisions, what's best for the community. And that's really important. The people that sit around this table are no different to businesses, household, personal life, and things like that, where we're not always going, like the community, we're not always going to agree, and we all have strengths and weaknesses, but it's a team effort that helps make the decision, whatever aspect of life we're in. The rural ward, I have real concerns of the rural ward. I was thinking a bit about it last night. We often talk about Cambridge and Te Awamutu and things like that, but there's so many, we're no different to any other council, district council or whatever. There's so many other areas that where they have multiple towns and they'll be comparing each other all the time. So we're no different, but I don't support the rural ward being under one umbrella. Appreciate that nothing ever stays the same, whatever aspect of life again. We've always got to be moving and making amendments and adjustments, whether they're big or large, depending on what we're discussing. And just from Joe's summary, just so I've got this clear, did it say that the majority of the community didn't support the change? Is that right?
Sorry,
submissions?
The majority of the submissions did not.
Yeah. So whether we again agree with this or not, the perception is out there in the community that the organisation, whether it's, you're not pointing at one person in particular, but whether it's staff or councillors or community board, aren't listening to them, whether that's right or wrong. That is, it is clear from the summary that, or submissions, that the community don't support the change. And so we've really got to take that on board. And then so based on that, I'm sort of more weighted towards the status quo. I believe that's currently the right way, but with some adjustment, further discussion where appropriate, to make some changes if and where needed. So yeah, that's about what I've got to say. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Phil. So look, are you happy if I just, Marcus, I'll just go round to Dale Marie.
Kia ora tātou. I'm not going to labour. I'm kind of going towards where Monty went, because with someone who brings a voice of diversity to this table, I appreciate, and as the ward that covers the whole district, I think it's really important that we maintain the rural voices that are very unique in our district. That's just my own whakaaro. I just want to touch base on regards to calibre, and if we had a reduction, whether that would improve things. I think for just putting it there at the table, that there will be many people that come with different skill sets that come to this table. But I think one thing that may have, just for my own experience, as someone who came in as a by-election, I think there could be some tweaks to how we do our induction for some of our councillors that come in, so that they have a bit of a for those that haven't been here at this table, they have a better desk file on how and what they read and how they get comfortable into this position at the table. Because I'll admit I've struggled a wee bit because I've had to run and keep up with everybody because I didn't have the insight, but I didn't get an induction like I think I would have preferred. And that's not a slight on how we've done things, because we've had to just keep moving and keep things ticking along. So I am going to be very much like Monty, because I appreciate diversity and that we do have to have good representation for our district. But I do think I would like to go with the current, but with an amendment to that. So yeah, kia ora tātou.
Yeah, I don't really have anything much more to add. I agree with Monty's comments. And also we've gone out for consultation, and the majority of consultation for the people that we represented have gone with the status quo. So yeah, I'm that's right.
Cool.
Thank you to the chair. The first thing I looked for was, with only 108 submissions and a lot of people in the district, I looked for how good were our comms. And Lisa, bloody brilliant. Okay, there was no excuse. This thing went out in newspapers, on Facebook multiple times. So from a Waipa district point of view, I think we've done a good job of giving people the opportunity to actually feed into this. So heads up to our comms team. And considering it was also twice as many people submitted as last time. So hey, a couple of things. One is the best people to sit around this table from across Waipa. I totally agree with the mayor there. I don't think anyone in the district would disagree with that. What I do see though is quite a difference between that from a political perspective as to having the skills to sit around this table and do the best job. And that's where I think the submissions and us ourselves reflecting have all agreed and landed at the same point. We can do a better job. The next thing I think for us is, if we get through this, whichever way it goes, is actually to build that into the next election, and picking up on Dale Marie's induction comment. That's where it'll start. And I think we've all met with the CEO and probably given us some ideas there. So to build better next term around, I think is a fundamental key objective of this council. Yeah, we've talked about submitters. I mean, that was clear. That was really my biggest point. I just think the people around here, through a better induction and better skills, we can actually do a better job. It's not about how many of us sit here. It's about the skill set of the people that sit here. And I think that's come through pretty clear from the submitters too.
Thanks, Mike. Lou.
Yeah, thank you for speaking. I've listened to everybody, and I actually agree with a lot of what has been said. Now, having lived in this district for well over 65 years, I do know one thing for a fact, and that both of our towns rely on our rural population for survival. We are reliant on that industry to carry us on and have our operations operate. I would take one point of issue when we talk of governance and managerial, just to say that having sat on boards, I know that I had a KPI. When I went to sit as a director, I was given a specific area to operate in. I was there for a specific reason, and that's what happened. When we are voted in, we are voted to represent the people that are supporting us as best as we can. Sometimes it might not agree with the direction that the council's going with. And I think we've got to take that on board, because we are here to represent the people that had the courage or the ability to vote for us. And I think that having been involved in a lot of organisations in this town, quite a few and still currently so, quite often hear back feedback that is quite disparate to what we're getting told here in this table. And that is something that you must be able to voice. When we're talking of governance, if you just turn around and follow the leader, we'll never get that voice. And so that's what democracy is all about, having that ability to have those disparate voices raised and listened. I'd just like to finish off and say, look, I just looked at the figures here and reducing councillors, so that was 72% against, 23 support, and support 5% neutral. We're living in a growing area. We are a tier 1 council. Waikeria is growing. We're going to see exponential growth probably in Te Amuru, Kiki and the area from people from there. We've got a huge lot of business going into Haltap. We've just done a lot of resource consents there. And that's going to increase the population. So I can't see that reducing the figures would actually improve our governance capability. I know that most of us, and I agree with Claire or Councillor Claire, the fact that we've all got subcommittees that we sit on. And we go to those and they have agendas and workloads just as equal, not quite as equal as council, but quite a significant amount. The other thing I'd like to see as well is that we keep the community boards operational. They are the direct link to the community. Although most of us as councillors do get out in the community, we need that voice. So with that all in purpose and with all those statements, I would like to say that I'd like to remain at status quo. I fall down at status quo as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Lucky last. Yeah.
I'll fire straight from the beginning. I'm not in support of the initial proposal. I think the current representation works, and I have to speak from a rural ratepayer and the people I represent, not only submissions, but who I've heard generally. So I think what the system we've got from a rural perspective, works well. We serve the communities of interest. We've got many small ones, especially in our ward, that we have to mix with. I also see some issues, and we've got no control over that. If we reduce from 3 to 2 of the people we get. I know it's an election and we've got no say on that, who we may get around this table, but we still, from my experience, the elections I've contested, some of these people are going to take 2 terms to come up to school. So that's a big worry for me. I also do totally agree with the comments that have been said that there could be a complete bias. I hope there's not in the future from west to east if this was to happen and you only have 2 representatives. So yeah, I think what is going, I was here when we reduced it from 13 to 11. 11 seems to work very well. And from a rural perspective, the way the wards have changed, I think it works. It's super. So I think we can improve that as been said, improve on what we've got now. But yeah, so I'm not in support of the initial proposal.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, so we canvassed the table, but Susan.
Can I just have indulge you just for a right of reply? Just appreciating hearing everybody's points of view, and I'm encouraged by the richness and the depth of thinking people have applied to this issue. Just a couple of things I wanted to raise. I think there's a little bit of a danger in summarising the paper and the submissions as, and I've heard a couple of people saying this, it's pretty clear the community don't support a change. I think there's a real danger in saying that, and I'm only doing this because the mathematician's coming out in me. You'll be proud of me, Roger. I've got my data here and I've done a bit of dividing. Essentially, we had a response of our population as listed as 61,000. The total feedback received in this exercise equates to 0.16% of our population. And the people that oppose this proposition equates to 0.138% of our population. So I just want to put a little bit of a word of warning around making quite ambitious claims that the community don't support a change on the strength of 0.138%, but I shall leave that there. I also just wanted to note that and push back against a little bit of the suggestion that the proposition is somehow seen as failing to value diversity. That's not the case at all. I've been a strident advocate since the day I came into this building about the need for diversity, and diversity doesn't present itself necessarily in age, gender, orientation, ethnicity. Diversity presents itself in terms of your skill sets, your experiences to get to a place, and who you are as a person. So it's not about an attack on diversity. So I just sort of a little bit defensive there. And I guess I just wanted to also say that I'm a little bit troubled by the constant discussion about the differences in our district. I appreciate that we're all unique. We're told constantly we're all unique, but I think that we have a great deal more in common than we have in difference. And I want us to focus on the stuff we have in common and the shared views rather than holding on to this perception of being so different from each other. We're not. We all basically inherently want the same things. So I just felt I needed to address that. And also just in closing, wanted to remind you that in all of our discussions of late that we've all acknowledged that the way we've done things in the past are probably not going to be the way we do things into the future. So those are my comments. Appreciate the process, appreciate the limitations we have in terms of things that we can put out to our community on and what we can consider. But and I really am heartened by some of the deeper thinking that people have shown today, even though it seems you're not all going to agree with me.
Andrew, can I have 1 minute?
The power of democracy, right?
Of course, Monty.
I don't normally ask for this.
No. I said at the beginning that the informal tenor of the meetings that we normally enjoy will continue.
Look, I don't normally ask, and it was because I led the opposition, shall we say. I just wanted to just respond and to say something important. Mayor Susan, look, on the surface, you've spoken in favour of this, the rest of the table haven't. And I just wanted to say that I think you're doing your job really well here by challenging us to lift our game and to consider this. So I don't want anyone to think that that you supporting this, the rest of us not, is any problem. I don't think so at all. I would expect our leader to be challenging us to do better. And I think when this was first raised in a workshop, we were sort of relatively okay with it as a group. By the time it came to formally approving the consultation, it had dropped down to just a majority. As the details came out of what this was actually going to look like and we thought about it and we listened to the community, now we've got to this point. But for me, that is no failing at all. It's nothing wrong. It's good process. And I really thank you and applaud you for challenging us to lift our governance game. That's why I thought it was important to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Monty. And look, if anyone else has got another point to raise, you're welcome to do so. But okay, so first of all, Dale Marie, then Mike.
I just want to point out, because I've had several emails, and just want to point out to everybody, there were no Waipa Māori ward submissions, because the feedback that I received is that they hope that people will appreciate the ward, the Māori ward, and that's why they didn't engage. A lot of my people didn't want to engage in this process because they care for the representation of non-Māori. Tēnā koutou.
Thanks, Dale Marie. Mike.
Hey, just off the back of what Susan said, that statement around the things we did in the past and not necessarily what we should be doing in the future, and I totally agree with that. And you also picked up on that Ahuake and the World Cafe participatory democracy stuff. And look, again, I think that's part of our future. I mean, Kirsty and Vanessa led that stuff up, and that is part of what we need to be focused on as a council heading forward to directly be engaging the community in the ways that we've been doing it in the last year or so. That to me is win-win.
Okay, thanks. So look, I don't have a lot to add to the discussion, really. I think the points have been well canvassed. I do, yeah, so in terms of the submitters and submissions, I totally agree with you, Susan. It's not a numbers game. It's about the ideas that people bring forward. And I would very much like to thank the people who have submitted. They really, we've had such a variety of responses, and a lot of thought and effort has gone into what people have brought to us. And, you know, the people around this table have responded to that. So, you know, thanks to our submitters and thanks to you guys for, you know, bringing your intellect and experience to it. And in terms of, you know, the proposal in front of us, I'm very much in the mayor's camp when it comes to a group, as a group, making the best possible decisions. Absolutely. I'm not so much in that camp when it comes to the fact of, in particular, the rural wards and how that could impact negatively on representation in those areas. So look, that's probably all you need to say from me. So, you know, getting to the actual decision, whether we go for the initial proposal or whether we go for the current representation structure, I do want to pick up on something you said, Dale Marie, about the current structure, but with an amendment.
Yeah.
Be interested in what the amendment is.
Okay. Yeah, but I think I probably need to have a quick talk with Joe to understand something, because that's why I said the amendment. Kia ora.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to suggest, for a couple of reasons, a quick adjournment while you do that.
Do you want to speak?
So, sorry.
Do you want to speak?
Oh, I was just going to say that there is also, you know, as well as the number of councillors, there is also, you'll see from the presentation in your sheet, there is another, you know, a number of other options and elements of the decision that we need to work through. So I don't know whether you want to break now for lunch or whether you want to carry on and then we'll just have 5 minutes now. Up to you.
Look, let's take 5 minutes now and then see where we get to. Yeah. Dale Marie. I think we've got, okay, so look, we have no potential amendment, and I'm therefore going to go to page, oh, my laptop has decided to go back to sleep. Was it page 10? Was. And to me, clearly the tenor of the room is that we are looking to amend the initial proposal to revert to council's current representation arrangements, accepting the reasons for accepting and rejecting submissions as presented in the report. Do I have a mover in that?
Oh, hang on.
Sorry, Joe. I'm getting ahead of myself again.
Just in terms of, if we can work through all of the different elements and then have one recommendation at the end, which people may decide to vote in parts depending, because then it might be as we go through the proposal, it might be these other decisions that you might need to make. You might want to make some slight amendments to those, because you might say it's the current number of councillors with the, like, reverting to our current structure, but I want to do something different with the councillors on the community boards or something like that. So then we can all wrap that into one recommendation and the end to reflect that.
Okay, sorry, yep, I've got you. So you're saying we should maybe look at the boundary change proposal at Cambridge Ward.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So just in terms of.
Sorry, Joe, can I just get you to re-clarify for the group? I think it's along the lines of what Mike asked in regards to the discussion around the community board thing, and just in terms of the difference between, obviously we asked some specific questions in our consultation process, but what we're actually discussing here is the full Monty. Can you just re-clarify that for the group, please?
Yeah, so what went out, if in terms of, we did have, you had the submission form which we asked key questions on the changes that we were making, but actually when you look at the recommendation that you adopted on the 30th of July, that included the whole structure that you were adopting as your initial proposal. So it went through and adopted the 4 wards and the number of councillors in those. It then went on to say, we're going to retain 2 community boards, and this is what our community board is going to be made up of, and these are where the people are going to be drawn from. And so that was all part of what we call your initial proposal, was the whole structure. And so that's why we asked, a submission form asked questions on the key changes, and then there was a general comment section at the end. And so then it is open, because when you go out for your representation reviews, you're actually, the community can provide feedback on whatever aspect that they want to in relation to that whole initial proposal and whole structure.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I guess if people, yeah, I'm a little confused as well.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I suppose, and I know that was, you decided you wanted to retain the community boards as part of your initial structure, so that was an active decision you made. But that still means you're still going out to the community with your whole elected member structure. It's not something that you can go and say, we're just going to consult you on this particular aspect of what our elected member structure is going to be, and we don't want any feedback on anything else. You can't do that. You have to go out with the whole structure.
Yeah, okay. So looking at the papers you've provided us and the decisions that are required, the boundary change proposed for Cambridge Ward and the additional area at Karapiro, you're saying we do need to still make a decision on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so we need to go through all the elements of the feedback that was provided.
Yeah.
In terms of the boundary change that was there, that was just to put the area at the other side of the dam to the village into the Cambridge ward. There was that 44% were against that, 39 were in support. Those that were, there were comments that that area is becoming more urban anyway, Cambridge is expanding. Those that didn't support it said it's got more in common, with its current area and should be rural, and should be in with Mangatautari. In terms of the boundary change, if you were to go with the initial proposal, that would make it non-compliant with the plus or minus 10% rule, but obviously there's been talk around the table about retaining your current structure. That would mean you don't need to proceed with the boundary change that was part of the initial proposal, because that was needed for your the current structure. But in response to submissions, you could consider moving Karapiro into Mangatautari, which was something that came through in the submissions. It has been that.
So, okay, so look, submissions are relatively evenly divided. And, unless anyone around here has got, real reasons for progressing a boundary change, personally, I don't see any great need, but do it. Yeah.
I don't feel an urgent need to do that. I'd actually be worried about, painting ourselves into a corner in the future, because we've actually lost more people from the Mangatautari ward, at this point in time. Yes, I'm happy just retaining the status quo there.
Thank you. Any differing opinions? No? Okay. So,
Joe, is there any difference between, because this will be going to the Commission anyway, because we're non-compliant, is there any advantage to us tidying it up at our end, as in, we're sort of the masters of our own destiny, or do we just pass this across non-compliant and wait and see what happens?
yeah, so
The non-compliance with your current structure is actually on this side of the district.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this doesn't change anything from that point of view.
So just clarification on that point, that the current position of Karapiro in our current structure is compliant
Yes.
with the 10%.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. We're retaining the status quo, then the ward names don't come into play.
You still had submissions on the ward names, which you could, and the subdivision names. You will see that there was a couple of alternatives that came forward. I will skip through to the decision required sheet, so you still need to consider those. There were people that said they didn't like the word general and Māori in the descriptor of the title. We did have advice from the Local Government Commission that actually you do need to include those for legal electoral purposes. So while that wasn't favourable, it's not something that we can decide to remove. When you are looking at names, you need to think about what's the most common or predominant place or feature name, so people can easily associate it with. If you are looking to retain your current structure, you did have some suggestions in there from people that thought that maybe you could have the Waipa West Ward or the Waipa Rural West Ward, or the Waipa East Ward or the Waipa Rural East Ward.
Again, look, I don't.
No.
Personally, I'm happy with the status quo myself. Yep, lots of nods around the table. Roger.
I just remember the discussion we had at the last representation review, and the favour was given actually to the naming of the wards, Mangatautari, Pirongia, Kakipuku, because they actually reflected some of the history of our region in naming those wards. So I think that rationale, to my mind, still exists.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Bruce?
Joe, and the ward names, are we required to keep general? Because the Te Awamutu Community Board said they would like that not done, so
No,
we have to.
We've got to keep general.
Okay.
And you also had other feedback that they thought that the Māori ward should be spelt without a macron, or someone else said Māori names for all wards.
Kia ora tātou. I'm in support of spelling without macrons because that is the way of Tainui. That's our preference and that's how we spell most of our stuff at with the kingitanga. So I would like to see that we would morph to the double vowels because the macron is an indication of how and letters of how our reo has had another lens put on it. Kia ora.
Mike?
I'd just like to support Dale Marie, and I don't know if this is the time to do it or another time, but I have brought this up before, and I brought it up that every school in this region uses double vowels. The macrons are the past, not the future, to quote the mayor. Absolutely, 100%. Ngā te kore ki kahu kula, but Tainui umbrella, they are yesterday's news. So Waipa is in the word Waipa is in the same boat. So just
We'll come to you, but Diana has something to say from a legal point of view. Diana?
Oh, not so much from a legal point of view, but the Macron issue is some councillors may recall a few years ago, a decision was made to have Waipa District Council as a trading name with a Macron over the top of the A. Our name in the Local Government Act has no macron and just one A. So if we were to revisit the style, that would obviously require a decision back to council to address that.
Yeah, okay. So that was going to be my question. Is this the place where we make that decision? Is this
Just in terms of, well, yeah, I know it's linked with that, but later this is part of you'll be deliberating on the final proposal that will go to the 15th of October decision.
Yep.
And then that will be the name of the wards that you decide then, unless there's any appeal or objection on it until you do your next representation review, because names are also part of the elements that you can only decide through a representation review.
Okay, so we can put in that we wish Maori to be spelt with a double A and
Sorry to interrupt you, Chair. I do just wonder if this is the appropriate forum for the conversation. While we need to make a decision in regards to representation review, just in terms of the complexity of this, I just wonder whether it's just worth
yes, I totally agree that
a status quo recommendation and then it taken as a separate conversation.
So that we change all of our spellings at once makes sense. Yes.
Sorry, I don't want to be out of line. I just
And look, I'd just like to say I'm totally in favour of being consistent with Tainui and the rest of our district in terms of spellings, but let's do it so that we do the whole shooting match in one go.
I totally support that.
Okay.
That will flow through as time allows.
Councillors on community boards.
So we did have quite the variety of feedback that was provided on that in terms of councillors on community boards, right from there shouldn't be any and they should only have advisory roles, right through to all councillors should be on community boards. There was emphasis placed on the importance of having rural councillors on community boards and always having rural and urban. And there was also brought up having Māori ward councillor on community boards. In response to as we've talked about before, there was also people that did raise issues about whether you wanted on or express their views on whether they thought we should retain community boards. And we also had some additional community boards suggested a rural community board and a community board covering the current Prongia Ward Committee. So you need to make a decision on that. Obviously, in terms of the decision to retain the community boards, that was the appeal point that we had last representation review. The Local Government Commission held that we should retain the community board. Also, as part of in response to submissions, you decided to do that review with Stephen Finlay and look at the role and function of community boards. And we implemented a process for that, which is currently ongoing. So you will see at page 18 of your report, you've got the advantages and disadvantages of, or actually page 19, retaining community boards. They retain their independent electoral representatives at the local level, represent a specific community or communities that, and they're obviously able to advocate for their community as opposed to a councillor which has got that district-wide hat on. Some people think that just kind of duplicates that councillor level representation. It's a disadvantage. In terms of any kind of rural community board that you were to consider, it would require adjusting representation on the current community boards. Otherwise, what you would have is overlap. Rural community board obviously enhances the rural representation at a local level. In terms of issues with that, as I set out in the report, kind of would need to kind of look at if you had that, how that was constructed, because if you had one big rural ward, you could end up with all your representatives coming from your big population base. If you're going to divide it into subdivisions, you've still got your big population base over this side, and how you kind of are able to divide that up in terms of the plus or minus 10%, you might then not be capture those smaller communities, which kind of does lead on to that other option that was put forward about what about the Prong area the Prongia Ward Committee covers. And you do have the advantage there of that ward committee that it can pull representatives from those different communities from a kind of raft of population bases, and we don't have to worry about a plus or minus 10% rule, so that the Prongia has one representative and, Te Pahu's still allowed to have one, which if you go to a community board, that then kind of will end up really disproportionately in favour of Prongia, and those smaller communities, it's going to lessen their representation around that community board table, just because of the, when we're looking at that numbers game, even if you went kind of at large in that area for your community board, you kind of really got the same issues with those numbers and being able to get a good mix from a variety of communities.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Jo. To me, I think this whole area was canvassed pretty well in our last review, and we landed on where we are. And if we're not going with our initial proposal, I don't really see a huge reason for changing community boards as they are. That's me, but Claire and Mike wish to, and Claire.
Yeah, thanks. So some of the things that came through were whether or not there should be a Māori ward councillor as one of their councillors that's appointed. And I thought that'd be good to discuss. Yeah. And also whether or not the councillors that are appointed should have voting rights. So I'm not sure if it was actually in a submission, but it did come up as a question. Yeah, and I thought that would also be worth discussing. And lastly, I'm sure I saw it in one of the submissions, if not more, why can't the community boards choose which councillors? Yeah, so I suppose the rule is that council has to make the appointment, but can we have a process where the community board actually nominates who their preferred people would be or something. Yeah, so three big things there.
There,
So we've
Mike.
got-
Sorry,
Or just to point out that we've got that next kind of slides covers councillors on the community boards and runs through all those questions.
and I guess, look, I'm assuming that we're retaining the community board. Let's nod, okay. Good, and in that case, Mike. So Mike, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, look, hey, it's obviously on the next slide too. It's really supporting what Claire said here. So my question was actually to really Diana of, is it legal? Are we allowed to, however the councillors are appointed, and Claire's got some discussion to have there, that they do not have voting rights? Because I think that's the question.
Through the chair, answer is no, that's not possible.
Right.
There's not different tiers of membership. So it's either they're elected or they're appointed, but they're both same level of membership.
Right. Thanks for that. And then my next one, just to add on to Claire, is the Te Kahanui representatives is another alternate to the Māori Ward councillor, because, you know, we've got 2 community boards, I'm thinking workload, and it's really about that cultural lens. And I think they could do it as an appropriate job as the person sitting in your seat, Dale Marie. So.
Just in terms of we're not able to have Te Kanohi on community boards, it's a bit like, you know, you're allowed to have additional representatives, you know, when you have your committees, and that's why we have Te Kanohi on service delivery and SPMP and REG. So you're allowed to appoint additional members at your committee level, and the same applies for the community boards. Like if they had a committee that they operated underneath the community boards, you could appoint Te Kanohi to that, but you can't actually, it's the same as we can't appoint Te Kanohi to council, we can't appoint Te Kanohi to the community boards.
Okay, thanks, Joe. That's clear. Susan.
Through you, Andrew. Just have a real, this is part of my head that's feeling really uneasy about some of the more sort of significant changes that have been potentially raised by people in their submissions. As a procedural, with a procedural end, I sort of feel there's a real danger in really adopting and considering any significant changes without having those proposals actually consulted with our community. So for example, let's just, and I hope I'm not stepping out of the line here, but let's just say, because we've already talked through here that we get over the page and we get to retaining community boards, if we decided, and I'm not saying it's going to happen because it's pretty clear, if we all decided now that we didn't retain them on account of somebody saying in there, let's not retain them, that is a huge transgression in terms of consulting with our community. So I just want to put out a little bit of a word of warning around jumping to talking about adopting significant changes off the strength of 1 or 2 submissions, because they can have quite large impacts, and I don't think that's really what our role is.
I'd like to actually speak to support with Mayor Susan on that, absolutely. And I think in this situation, we must retain status quo at the present point in time. If we want to change community boards and their representation, we should go out and ultimately consult on that issue, not do it through this format. So I would support Mayor Susan.
Yeah, no, thanks, Lou. But I think Joe's point is that these issues have been raised in submissions, and we have to acknowledge and Okay, so I'm getting a real. No, I'm not.
All right, all right. So I want to know what we can and cannot decide here. So got this thing around here. You can have knowledge, you can have understanding, and then you can go to action. But to be honest, sitting around these tables for the last 15 years, there's been, councillors that have sat on those community boards that have had knowledge, that have had understanding, but have not had the key thing of empathy for the board and have had some action, have not really been effective for the board. And that's what I don't think we're diversifying too much more. And I don't think we need to consult with the community, because the decision of who goes on those community boards at present sits around this table, not with the community. The appointments are made at this table. So what I'm saying is well, what Claire's put forward is there another way of, just because you're a rural representative and because someone from town, the rural person ain't got a choice, really. If you're from Mangatochili, you're on there. Whether you've got empathy or you want to be there or not, I don't think that's great for decision-making for the community board. So I think what Claire's saying is there another way of doing it? The people that want to put their hand up, of just giving the council the option when the time comes to say, these two people are really keen, but you would sit there as councillors representing the whole district.
That's actually a really good point, particularly around the rural side of things, because.
Okay, so what is your actual proposal?
The proposal is that the council has flexibility of which councillors are appointed on the community boards, not just because one is from a rural ward. It's really the rural ward thing here. The others have got options, but Mangatochili has not got an option.
Just hang on a minute.
Yeah, can we just, sorry, the mayor, but can we just figure out a few process things here in regards to this discussion?
Yeah, so Joe, I mean, are we talking about something that is possible to do, or?
Well, what, in terms of the councillor representative on the community board, it's got to draw from the area that the community board covers. Currently, in your current structure, you say it must be the rural representative and it is an urban representative. Well, effectively you say it must be, because there's only one rural representative for both ones. So that person doesn't get a choice, and then you get to have a choice about the urban. In terms of if there was wanted to be greater flexibility, in terms of when we did the initial proposal, when we were doing the community board councillor appointments, we used that and or. So it was going to be from the relevant urban ward and or the Waipa Rural General Ward. So that would allow you the flexibility when it came to the time. You could have in that situation chosen 2 urban councillors, or you could have chosen 2 Waipa rural ones. They both were drawn from the area that the community board covers, but it gave you the and or gave you the flexibility. It does mean with that flexibility, I mean, some of the submissions that came through said that they did want that definitive rural and that definitive urban, like you lose that, but there is a way with the and that way you could have potentially the the Māori ward councillor in there as well, so you could have the relevant urban general ward, the and or the relevant rural ward, and or the Waipa Māori ward, and then you could choose from that pool, and you would choose 2 at that time when you made your appointment. So you would have more flexibility in that scenario than you do currently have.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got a feeling that Dale Marie's got a big enough workload already, but look, I'm just going to give Dale Marie and then we're going to adjourn for lunch, because I'm being told that you guys look tired and hungry. So Dale Marie.
Just a little bit of clarity. So this is the magic, this is the magic that Māori wards can bring, because we bring urban, rural, everything else. So yeah, let's go to lunch just with that.
Okay, so lunch, and I'm going to ask that we're back at 20 past.
We'll need to make sure the live stream's on.
We're looking for Stephen, I guess. So. Yeah, Jesus, can't die.
Don't give me them.
Mhm. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Joe, you've got to clarify a little issue about community boards.
Yeah, we're going to hand over to Diana.
Through the chair, so just to step back, so in terms of under the Local Electoral Act, in terms of the composition of a community board, so you would have the majority need to be elected, and also some can be appointed by the territorial authority. And the people who are appointed by the territorial authority must actually be from the ward which, you know, covers the actual geographic area where the community board is. And so there are various options about what council could do in terms of those appointments. So just bring us back to what we currently have. So currently we appoint 2 members to each community board. One must be from I guess you'd call it the urban version of the urban ward, and then one's from the rural ward. So that's what we currently have. Either one must be from the urban side and one must be from the rural side, and those people would be appointed to the relevant community board. What we put out in terms of our initial proposal earlier in the year was that we would have, just bear with me, we would have 2 appointed members, and they could be either from the relevant urban or the rural. So potentially you could have 2 from urban or 2 from rural. It depends. There would be discretion about who could decide. So that was the sort of 2 options. What has come out of the submissions is the possibility of also adding the Māori ward councillor as one of those 2 that are appointed. And so that would be meaning that we would amend what we put out in the initial proposal to appoint 2 appointed members from either the urban, the rural, or the Māori ward. And then that would give the options, particularly if we're looking at, you know, who wants to join the most, that type of thing. That would give more opportunity and also ensures the Māori ward voice where that is you know, chosen. So that's the sort of 3 options that are on the table. Our current arrangement, which is 1 always urban, 1 always rural. What we proposed, which was either urban or rural, however we choose, we've got 2. Or our third option, which came out of the submissions, would be that actually we could choose from a third, which is the Māori ward as well.
That's really clear. I'll come to you in a moment, Roger. And I just want to put on record that I'm very happy with that third option. Apart from, you know, I'd be more than happy for our Māori ward councillor to be available to be appointed. However, it hasn't been consulted on. That's my, I guess, reservation. But what you're saying is that because it has come up in submissions, that it's still, we are able to make that change. And just thinking through, because it's available to be made, doesn't mean to say it is going to be made either, of course. So yeah, so that's correct what I've just all said.
That is correct. And so to clarify, in terms of the change, it'd still be the same numbers of appointed members, which is sort of, I guess, in terms of the composition of community boards, 2 are appointed and the remainder are elected. And the other thing, whilst it specifically might not have been consulted on, there is additional opportunity if the community, if members of the community wanted to appeal that point for the Local Government Commission to consider. So it gives additional opportunity for that point to be considered.
Thank you, Diana. That was very clear. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. I didn't hear it said, you said appointed members, but they are appointed elected members.
That's correct.
So it's just that when you were talking, it didn't come through that
Yes,
they had to be elected members.
That's
Okay.
correct.
No, that's really good. Do I have anyone? That's okay. So that's nice and clear. Am I taking it that we would wish to include that in the recommendation?
We're including a proposal that we haven't consulted on, just make. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think the really relevant, thank you, relevant point for me is that it does have the ability to be contested when this goes to commission.
Yeah, Andrew, I think it'd be helpful if Joe could or Diana could just go through that, you know, what happens once we actually finalise this proposal, adopt it, because then, you know, it's still got to go through a bit more stuff before it's actually going to be, given effect to. And there's, I don't know, Joe, you could probably say it better than me, because that allows for the changes to go back to the community. And there's every chance that, they can pick stuff up that they don't like and tell us that, or tell the commission that.
Might get Stephen online. So are you able to cover that off, Stephen?
Yep, sure, certainly. The process from this point is that once the council adopts its final proposal, which you would do next month as it's currently scheduled, the council must publicly notify the proposal, and it is then open for appeals and objections for 1 month. Appeals can be made by anybody who submitted on the initial proposal, and their appeal has to be in relation to matters that they submitted on. Objections can be made by anybody if the final proposal is different from the initial proposal. So in the case that, as it seems at the moment, the final proposal will be different from the initial proposal, then it would also be open to objections as well as appeals. And those objections can be made by anybody and on any matter. So effectively, all of the material in the final proposal is subject to another round of public comment through the appeals and objections process. The council receives those appeals and objections, and they are then forwarded to the Local Government Commission, which will then hold, if it deems that it wants to, it will hold hearings on those appeals and objections. It could elect to simply make it or hold a hearing on the papers and just review the material that's been provided to them. Given that it is likely also that the final proposal will have an element of non-compliance with the plus or minus 10% element, that also triggers a review by the Local Government Commission. So I think it's likely that there would be a hearing, if not in person, then at least remotely with the Local Government Commission. They will look at all of the elements of the proposal and make their determination before April next year. So that's the process as it sits currently.
All right. Now I'm going to ask if we've got a recommendation to look at.
Just perhaps raise a question is if it's going to go through April, we're going into a triennium election. Okay, so we need confirmation prior to that, or we won't have it, will we? Going into our next triennium election.
I'm assuming we will.
There are statutory deadlines in terms of that the Local Government Commission has. I think it's either the 9th or 11th of April. They've got to have resolved all of the appeals and objections that have been sent to it. They have, you know, as a preliminary process, gone through and allocated people that are going through representation review dates, and we would be, I think it's around mid-March if ours went to a hearing. So it does, because all of our material need, if there is an appeal and objection or with the non-compliance, it will all need to be with them before Christmas, and then they take it from there.
Yeah, so the election's not till October.
What I'm actually raising was that because of the not likelihood of a non-compliance, we might be asked to alter something for the election.
No, they do that.
They
Lou.
do that.
Yeah, they can. They can. So we're going for aware of what they're doing.
Be a first. George.
Sorry, through the chair. Joe, are we just able to get clarification of which submission or submissions this is applying to?
In relation to the Waipawa Māori Ward,
Yes.
that was the Cambridge Community Board. That will be at the one of the first.
Do we, and I'm saying we, Monty and I, have a conflict here? Cambridge Community Board? No.
Just mentioned in that one.
Sorry, I guess the issue is Susan has alluded to is we're potentially making a change that has not been consulted on. Yeah, I feel a little uncomfortable with that, I guess. But at the same time, our community has the opportunity to, you know, add to the process that the Commission's going to go through. So, Roger.
Yes, can I just comment on that point? My understanding is that if the fact that this representational review has gone through now, then it's a further 6 years before another representational review will occur, irrespective of the Māori Ward issue. I think the fact that we all believe that this is a beneficial change to the system, are we not wise to put it in now, even though we haven't consulted with it, because the next opportunity to make such a change will be 6 years down, which I think we would lose the benefit of. So I think the risk of putting it in now as a not consulted on change has its beneficial advantage.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point, Roger. And no one can say we don't listen to our submitters. We're making a change. So
I have some comfort knowing it came from the community board because they speak for a larger volume of people, right? And it was more that it just felt weird to me that we, and I don't mean in disrespect to any of the submitters, but if we had one lone submitter make a comment and then suddenly without showing due process, which we're really diligent about here, we suddenly swung into action responding to that lone submitter. I take a little more comfort, as I say, knowing it's from the community board, because they speak for a much broader representative base. So I feel a little better, but I still have the process-driven person in me still feels weird, but I have greater comfort.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, good point. Dale Marie.
Because we are worried about the perceptions that our community has. And I deliberately went and had a talk to Lisa about this today, and particularly around the 0.1%, whatever it is, that did submit. I just want some clarity. Because it is one submitter, I would like to see it taken out, because I hear what we are experiencing out in our community about perception. Because if it's taken out of this because of one submitter, that Māori ward can still be appointed to the community board, and either of those community boards when it comes back to this table. Yeah. And that's what I was coming to ask Susan about when I came and slipped next to her, was I wanted to know the clarity on that. So now I know that it won't be able to happen. Yeah. Then I am going to go with it to go in, because that's why I wanted some clarity, but yeah.
Yes, all this is doing is enabling that to occur. And it doesn't mean it necessarily will. I mean, the mayor will discuss with the potential candidates who wants to, go on the board, and it goes from there, sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. All right, I think we've arrived somewhere.
I think the other relevant point is that Dale Marie is still an elected councillor with a responsibility within the community board area. So she meets the criteria of being an elected member with that responsibility, irrespective of the fact that she's a Māori.
So thanks to the long and hard work of our governance team, Joe, I'm sure you've put a lot of hours into making this happen. We have a recommendation up there now. Do I have a mover? Mike, and a seconder? Roger? All in favour? Contrary? It's carried. Well done, team. That was an effort. And closing karakia, please.
Tēnā tātou i te whare. He uaua o mātou mahi I tēnei rangi. Uaua. Tino pai o koutou mahi. Anuhia ki te uru tapunui, kia wātea, kia māma, tēnākau, te tinana, te wairua. Koia rā, ka whakairia ki runga kia tīna. Haumie, huie, tai ki e. Tēnā tātou.
Thanks, Dale Marie, and thanks everybody. Look, I'm sorry. I did the best I could.